My dear friends, Assalamu alaikum and welcome you all in this lecture series of botany of class 12th. Today we will discuss about reproduction in angiospermic plants. Reproduction in angiospermic plants. As we all know that living organisms do not survive for indefinite time. Every individual has an inherent ability to reproduce their young ones of own type. The phenomena by which a living organism reproduce their young ones is known as reproduction. Thus, we can say that it is a phenomenon of reproducing young ones of their own type. As we all know that life is diverse, that is different organisms involving different modes of reproduction. But this reproduction has been broadly grouped into two categories. That means reproduction is of two categories. First category is asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction. And second is sexual reproduction. That means reproduction is delimited into two categories. One is asexual reproduction, second is sexual reproduction. What is asexual reproduction? When living organisms reproduce without formation of gametes, without meiosis, without fertilization, that means single parent is involved, that phenomena, that mode of reproduction is known as asexual reproduction. That means without fusion of gametes. That is fertilization. There is no meiosis. And finally, there is no transfer of mutual transfer of genetic material. Genetic material from two parents. In simpler terms, we can say that asexual reproduction involves single parent and there is either splitting or modifying of parent parts later on result in formation of new or daughter individuals. There is no fertilization, there is no meiosis, there is no gamete formation, and finally there is no mutual transfer of genetic material to the daughter individuals. This asexual reproduction is broadly grouped for understanding into two groups. One is asexual reproduction in lower organisms and asexual reproduction in higher organisms that are plants. Let us talk first about asexual reproduction in lower organisms. Those organisms which have simpler structures may be eukaryotic or prokaryotic, maybe unicellular or sometimes multicellular, but they don't have well developed sexual structures for reproduction. So they reproduce by following means. These organisms reproduce by following means. Either by binary fission, or by multiple fission, or by budding, fragmentation, and finally by spore formation. These are few types of reproduction that do asexual reproduction in lower organisms. First is binary fission. When an individual, usually unicellular organisms, split into two equal halves, two equal units, and these units later on develop into separate individuals. That method is known as binary fission. That means simple parent individual splits into two units and each unit later on develops into a new individual. Such mode of reproduction is known as binary fission. Usually found in lower organisms, especially in bacteria and some protists. Second is multiple fission. In multiple fission, organisms, dominantly unicellular organisms, split into more than two parts. And by and large similar in size. When single body act as a reproductive unit and this reproductive unit split into more than two parts and each part later on represents a new daughter individual, it is known as multiple fission. It is usually found in species of amoeba, right? And some species of paramecium. After that, we will talk about budding. This budding is a phenomena in which species, either may be unicellular or multicellular, develops a projection on its body, and this projection looks like a bud, and this bud later on at time of maturity gets detached from the parent and starts developing a new individual. When such mode of reproduction takes place, we call it as budding. What is budding now? Budding is a phenomena when a living organism or an individual develops a projection. This projection matures and detaches from the parent, which later on develops into a new individual. It is known as budding. It occurs in yeast, first yeast and second in hydra. Now we will talk about fragmentation. Fragmentation is a phenomena usually dominant in bacteria, lower fungi, and some algae species. In this category, those organisms which are usually filamentous get fragmented, and each fragment develops a new individual. Such phenomena is known as fragmentation. What is fragmentation? It is a phenomena in which parent body splits into more than two parts and each part represents a new individual. It is known as fragmentation. Finally, there is a spore formation. Spores are normally single-celled. These spores act as propagules. And after dehiscence or detachment from parent plant gets germinated into new individuals. For instance, this is a species develops spores and these spores dehisce on the ground and later on these spores sprout and form new individual of a desired plant. When plants develop small miniature propagules which later on germinate into new individuals, such mode of reproduction is known as spore formation.